We don't eat here, we don't have breakfast here, we just sleep here, that's it.
Tony Beets of Gold Rush faced the worst situation anyone could find themselves in. He went from being one of the most popular cast members on Gold Rush to living a tragedy. His successful career took a hit, and things changed for the worse. How did Tony deal with the painful moments in his life? Did he make a comeback from the hardship he faced? This is a story of Tony's life and how he conquered the Yukon mines. Stay tuned. Long before the world knew his name, Tony Beets was just a restless farm boy in the Netherlands. He grew up doing farm work, cows, fences, endless horizons that never changed. His hands were made for work, though his heart always wanted more. The soil beneath him felt too safe, too predictable for someone with his hunger, so he left, chasing a promise of fortune that echoed from Canada's frozen north. When he first arrived in the Yukon, he carried nothing. No money, no connections, not even a clear plan. Just the kind of stubbornness that refuses to quit. He started at the bottom, fixing equipment and doing labor that other men abandoned. The winters froze his fingers. His resolve never wavered. He watched others pull gold from the same dirt and decided then that he could too. What separated Tony from the rest wasn't luck. It was relentless. He didn't just mine gold. He mined every opportunity hidden in the ground. Every mistake taught him something. Every setback left a scar that made him tougher. By the time Gold Rush cameras found him, Tony was already something rare. A self-made operator in boots and oil-stained hands. The boy from a Dutch farm had become the man who moved mountains. And when the world finally saw him on television, when those cameras started rolling and the microphones picked up his voice, they didn't see a farmer. They saw a force of nature that seemed almost unstoppable. Tony Beets was raw power in a beard, not polished or patient. His language matched the gravel he mined, rough. His temper was a storm that kept his crew alert. Yet behind that intensity was sharp thinking. He saw value where others saw only waste. Old machines, forgotten claims, land that others had written off as worthless. He turned broken metal into money. He brought abandoned equipment back to life through pure will. Where other miners hesitated, Tony pushed forward with force. His dredge, a massive machine from another century that he rebuilt with sheer determination, became proof of his refusal to accept defeat. The world watched him work hard, direct his crew with power, and win season after season. He built an operation across the Klondike, bringing in family, friends, and anyone tough enough for his demands. His wife Minnie managed the numbers with discipline. His sons Kevin and Mike learned to lead crews. And then there was Monica, his daughter, the one with fire in her eyes and strength in her spirit. She would become the heir to everything he built. But building an empire with family meant something else too. Building something far more complicated than gold or machines. It meant building tension that would eventually crack beneath the weight of ambition. At the center of Tony's success was his family, both his greatest advantage and his biggest risk. Together they ran Paradise Hill, a place of machines and people, where every bit of gold came from sleepless nights. Tony was a true leader, strong, protective, and almost impossible to satisfy. Kevin became his right hand, carrying both his father's dedication and his stubborn nature. Mike handled machinery as if it were part of his own body. Monica fought through a world that doubted her. She started at 12 running a loader. By 16, she was directing crews that had once ignored her orders. The Beets family seemed unbreakable. They were Gold Rush royalty, and their name meant power and success. Yet beneath the winds and the gold that poured out, tension was building. Arguments about equipment or how work got done hid something deeper. Tony's need to control everything clashed against his children's desire to make their own choices. For years they accepted this because the gold made it worth it. Though even gold cannot hold a family together forever. The real test was coming, not from disagreements in offices or tensions around a table, yet from something far more powerful, something they couldn't argue with or negotiate around. It came from the land itself. The Yukon has a cruel way of showing miners who truly rule this place. Tony knew this better than most, yet he wasn't ready for how fast everything could fall apart. The first sign was small, melting snow, water rising up, a wet spot on the mine floor. Within days, that wet spot became a flood. Paradise Hill, once a symbol of power and control, turned into a lake. When Tony arrived, his boots sank into the mud of his own failure. He didn't say much, just stood there looking at what had been lost. Monica's sight was underwater. Kevin's equipment jammed because of fallen trees blocking it. Hours turned into days, and the machines that once made money for them just sat there, silent. Tony had built his kingdom on dirt. Now, the dirt was gone. Every miner fears one thing above all else: the feeling of powerlessness. But what happens when the man who'd beaten every problem through hard work is forced to watch the earth destroy his work? The flood wasn't just water, it was a warning. His empire had met a real challenge. The king of the Klondike wasn't beaten by other miners or their money. He was swallowed by his own land. And just when he thought the worst had passed, a new enemy emerged. One he couldn't dig through. One he couldn't fix with his hands. When the water went down, a new problem came: permits. The government wouldn't give him approval to mine at his new sites. No permit meant no digging meant no gold. It was an obstacle no machine could dig through. Rules and paperwork were enemies he couldn't see or fight. For years, Tony had fought the land and won. The government didn't care about his willpower. His crews sat idle, and instead of pushing forward, the heart of his business stood still. The man who once roared through every problem now sat trapped by silence. He used to say, "You can't mine without water." He never thought that drowning in paperwork would feel worse than drowning in actual water. What do you do when your greatest strength, hard work, determination, willpower, becomes useless against an enemy you can't see or fight? The permits eventually came through. The damage, though, was already done. His money was hurt. His mind was tired. The world, which had always seen him as unstoppable, now saw a man who could be beaten. For the first time, the person who never accepted defeat had to know what that felt like. But while Tony was fighting bureaucracy, while he was buried in forms and waiting in offices, someone else was fighting something just as fierce: the right to be heard. While Tony fought the system, Monica fought to be heard. She had waited years for her own ground, her own claim to mine. Every season her brothers got more space and equipment. She heard, "Wait until next time." Next time never came. When she finally found a good site, she needed machines and water to start. Tony said he would help. Then he found gold somewhere else, and she got pushed aside again. "Everyone else has a claim," she said. "I just want mine." Her words carried weight heavier than the Yukon air. Monica wasn't just asking for a chance. She was demanding the right to build her own path. For Tony, that was harder to give than any gold. He had built everything to stay in control. Now control was breaking his family apart. In his mind, he was protecting her. In her mind, he was holding her back. Mining isn't just a job, it's a battle against failure. And sometimes in the fight, the very machines you depend on turn against you. Even the strongest operator with the best equipment discovers that some forces can't be controlled by will alone. The first blow came without warning. A truck tipped over on a dam wall, hanging above a drop. It almost slid into the water where his equipment washes. Then the metal screen at the wash plant cracked wide open, stopping work for almost a week. Every hour meant gold they didn't pull from the ground. Hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting idle. Tony shouted at the problems. He fixed them with his own hands. He welded parts back together and cursed the situation, yet something had shifted inside him. His anger didn't ignite the same way anymore. It came slower now, heavier. All those years of fighting one problem after another had caught up with him. As Tony finally met his match, was this the beginning of the end? Not from a single catastrophic failure, but from the slow wear of 1,000 battles? By the time the equipment finally worked again, he had lost 6 days and $300,000 in gold he never got to mine. The man who once ran everything with precision now worked in chaos. His empire still stood, though it was breaking down from the inside. Deep down, Tony knew. Gold wasn't the only thing draining away. Something inside him was draining too, and the worst part was still coming. The creek that had always flowed freely was about to turn against him. The final blow came quietly. The water cleaning system that he used to keep his operation safe began to overflow. The rules were clear. Let dirt spill into the creek, and you're finished. He shut everything down. Trucks stopped. Crews waited. Hours cost thousands of dollars. He ordered new walls, new drainage systems, new repairs. The costs kept rising. Then an accident. A truck flipped during the work. Another machine got stuck. More time lost. More money is gone. The Yukon doesn't care who you are. On that quiet piece of land, Tony Beets, the loudest voice on television, met a silence he could not break. By the end of the season, the numbers told a brutal story. 3,000 ounces of gold, less than his rivals wanted, less than his goal, barely enough to pay for all the CIs. The Yukon doesn't care who you are. On that quiet piece of land, Tony Beets, the loudest voice on television, met a silence he could not break. By the end of the season, the numbers told a brutal story. 3,000 ounces of gold, less than his rivals wanted, less than his goal. Barely enough to pay for all the chaos and lost time. What began as a search for glory had become a fight just to stay alive financially. Reports spoke of money troubles, unpaid bills, fines, late pay for workers. This was the beginning of the end of an era. Today, Tony Beets is still in the Klondike. His dredges still run. Gold still comes out of the ground. It's not the same as before. The best days seem like old stories now. He hasn't lost everything in gold. He's lost it in time, in years that took more than they gave back. Do you think Tony Beets will ever reclaim his throne in the Klondike? Or has the Viking finally mined the last ounce of his empire? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching this video with us. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this.